I sat down recently with my friend Paul Woodadge, a man who wears a lot of different hats, both figuratively and literally. He's based out of Bayeux in France, and you will find his website, ddayhistorian.com, and his YouTube channel, World War II TV, where you can subscribe for free. We had a really interesting conversation. I think you will enjoy it. Stick with it through the glitches in the sound. It's well worth it. Enjoy. So, Paul, well, you hold lots of different titles and wear lots of different hats. So maybe you can start by just introducing, in a very broad sense, what you do.
Well, yeah, it's always very hard to know how to label myself because I'm a historian, little h, not capital H. I'm not a qualified historian, but I've been doing it for a long time. So I make little movies about World War II. I do battlefield guiding. I write about it. I talk about it. But I'm sort of master of many. No, what's it? Jack of all trades, master of none. Really, I suppose. I don't know, but yeah, I just talk about World War II. That's it, basically.
I think you're being very humble, Paul. So
Oh,
what I know about
well,
you.
the thing is, there's a particular sort of movement on Twitter and what have you about label historian that gets very complicated, and I don't. I mean, I call myself a D-Day historian, but I say it's kind of little h rather than capital H. And some people who've put loads of work in doing the PhD type thing and master's degrees and what have you, they feel very protective of that. And I completely respect that and completely understand that. But I also think there's another way into being able to convey history. And mine is more of a practical, in the field, in the streets kind of way. And I think, yeah, labels are very hard. And whenever I do any TV work, I always say, I don't know what you would call me. Do you call me an expert, author? It all sounds odd.
Okay, well, I would call you a very talented D-Day guide, also a filmmaker, also a historical consultant on TV and film productions, an author as well, right?
Yeah, I do. I've worn all those hats, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I don't really like to be pigeonholed, particularly in one of those things, because it's very fluid. And this year, 2020, with all the virus issues, it's pushed me down paths that I hadn't thought I would be going down, and other paths have been kind of blocked off temporarily. So I don't know that I want to be labelled in one category because it restricts you from possibly going into the other categories. So yeah, no, it's a bit of everything really.
Okay.
The ultimate goal is to communicate history, I suppose. That doesn't sound too pretentious.
No, it doesn't. And we'll get to more of that. But first, I want you to talk about where did all this interest come from? How did you get interested in World War II and in D-Day specifically? Where did it start?
It's interesting because I don't know, for many years I understood where it all came from. And then more recently, it all made sense when I found out I was one of a whole group of people in Britain, particularly, who are about the same age. And I'm 51 now. So people sort of from about 46, 47 up to about 57, 58. And it means we went through our childhood in the 1970s. Now, the 1970s in Britain was when little boys played with airfix kits, making Spitfires and hanging them from your ceiling on fishing wire. You played with Sherman tanks. You read the comics we all had called Commando and Battle and all these things, and Warlord. And we watched war movies on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday afternoon, The Great Escape, Battle of Midway, Cross of Iron, all those classic movies. And there's a whole group of people who are now using that childhood to convey history in various ways. So there's people like James Holland, the author. Al Murray, the comedian, is about 2 years older than me, and he wrote a book 4 or 5 years ago now called Growing Up in the 1970s and Watching War Films with Your Dad. And sitting and watching A Bridge Too Far with his dad. His dad had been in serving military and going, that's wrong, that's not how it should be, and that kind of thing. And The generation before didn't get that experience, and the generation after didn't quite get that experience, because by the 80s, boys were playing more with science fiction toys and Star Wars and He-Man, Masters of the Universe, and that type of thing. The generation before, it was too soon, because the war was still too recent in the memory. They were still figuratively burying the dead from World War II. So my dad, who was born on V-Day Day, 45, he played Cowboys and Indians when he was a kid growing up. I played World War II. And the next generation played Star Wars. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole group of people who are about the same age. And we didn't, of course, know each other at the time. I could list off a whole raft of people who have that similar background. And of course, not only it was the time we were growing up in, it was the fact we all had relatives who had served, because you couldn't be a British person in the 1970s and not have World War II veterans around you. That's who they all were. They're all as a kid, my scoutmasters, some of even my teachers, they'd all been in World War II or just after war, national service. And so you grew up with World War II just being something that was a part of everybody's life, and that became a part of my life. So my grandfather was in the Royal Artillery in Britain for 5 years. My great uncle was on Sword Beach on D-Day, and that's where the D-Day path, I suppose, came from. And in particular, my great uncle, he was married, and they had a female lodger who lived with them. He had 2 daughters, so he lived in a female household, but he was the only guy. And he lived in London, and we were up in Essex, so a couple hours drive away back then. I only saw my Uncle Cyril, I don't know, let's say 3 or 4 times a year. And I was the one taking my little toy soldiers and things with me and reading World War II stuff. And he would talk to me more because I was the one who showed interest. Because when he said his family, during 1944, he all went shh, because they didn't want to hear his war stories. Because it was, shh, we don't want to hear about your war experience. So that was quite significant, although I don't know that I noticed it was significant then, if that kind of makes sense. And then the other thing, and I'm rambling now, is my first serious book on World War II, and I don't mean comics. I had comics since I was 5 years old. And I'm going off on a tangent. One of the things about you're American living in Europe is we have difficulty sometimes these days explaining to Americans that other countries were involved. On D-Day itself was actually a largely British and Canadian operation that the Americans had a part of, and you watch Saving Private Ryan, it's all American. But as a kid, I didn't know the Yanks were involved, because all of our comics were about Tommy Atkins in the Battle of El Alamein and brave Bobby Johnson flying his Spitfire over the channel and the Akat guns. And so it took a while before I realized, hang on, other countries than us. And my aunt, Jennifer, who was a librarian, she used to buy the remaindered books cheap for me. And she bought me a copy of Overlord by Max Hastings, now Sir Max Hastings. That would have been when I was about 10 or 11. And it's not that I gave up comics at that point and started reading serious books, but that was in my head, that was certainly the first serious book I got. And had she bought me a book about the Battle of Britain, maybe that would have ended up being my thing as opposed to Normandy. But it happened to be a book on Normandy, and then my great uncle was involved on D-Day in Normandy, and that just defined, I suppose, the path I took. And then I came to Normandy with my parents and my sister in 80 something or other, when I was 13, 14, whatever the hell it was. And it just got under my skin and became the place I wanted to go. And so that's where it started. It's a long answer to a simple question, really. But it was all these things coming together, the timing, my age, anyway, yeah, that hopefully explained it a bit.
So at what point, well, I don't know, I guess, when did you start guiding, or when did you start, when did you move to Normandy?
Well, I moved to Normandy in 2001, the week after 9/11, interestingly. There was no reason behind that. It was just that we'd planned the move, and that's when it happened. But I had been guiding before then, but I hadn't realized I was guiding. And by that I mean, it'll make sense in a minute. I had been associate member of various veterans groups
Mm-hmm.
in East Anglia where I grew up. FEPAL, Far Eastern Prisoners of War, the Parachute Regiment Association, Chelmsford, the Norwich and Norfolk Normandy Veterans Association, various groups and things.
Okay.
And I would go to these meetings, and sometimes they would go off to a museum, and I didn't actually accompany them to Normandy, but I would go to meetings where they would discuss their trip to Normandy. And the wives were there as well. And sometimes what would happen is you'd get 2 or 3 veterans of the same regiment, let's say the 1st Battalion Suffolk Regiment, and they'd be talking about one of the memorial services they were going to be going to when they got to Normandy. And, oh, that's going to be on the 7th. We'll go there at 11 o'clock. We'll walk down the path, go to the wood, and do our thing there. And sometimes the wives would then say to each other, you know, I don't know what we always go to that wood. I don't know why we go to that wood. What's special about that wood? And what would have happened over years is the veterans were dragging along their family members, but not always explaining why they went to certain places.
Mm.
They were just, the bus would park and they kind of all wander off to a corner of a field and stand there and cry or something and put a wreath and come back. And the wives didn't know how to ask their husbands, so why did you go to that wall over there? So what would happen is I would end up explaining to the wives, contextualizing why they would go that place. I would say, so the reason they go to that little wood is because that was the Battle of Leprosy Wood approaching Caen. And so they go there because on June the 6th, towards the end of the day, that's where the regiment got halted by 21st Panzer or whatever it would be. And they go, oh, we didn't know that. So I was guiding. I know guiding isn't the right word, but I was helping explain the events of Normandy to people who didn't know them. So I suppose it is guiding. And then I helped plan a few trips for groups of mates and stuff like that. I'd be the one who'd put the itineraries together and say, we'll do this, we'll do this. And in fact, I planned my family trip when we went when I forget what age I was, 13, 14. There's photos of me and I had hair then, unlike now. I had a Smith's t-shirt with a picture of Morrissey on the front because that was the big thing there. And there's me telling my dad how to go and see Omaha Beach and which road I was navigating. It's pre-GPS and everything, and I had my guidebooks I bought in advance. So I suppose I guided my family first, and then I helped explain things to wives of veterans. And then weirdly, that evolved into me then explaining things back to veterans because the veterans often only have the memory of the 30 yards of the war around them.
Yeah.
So they can remember with intimate detail being shelled in some forest somewhere, but they don't necessarily remember what day it was then.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily know who they were facing and what the operational mission was behind that. And so sometimes I'd find myself, it was very difficult because you'd never know when to kind of put your hand up and be the geek going, it was 21st Panzer, because they'd be talking. So who were those guys over there then, Jack? And I kind of wanted to go, I know this one. You didn't want to interrupt their flow because they're going through some sort of emotional journey.
Mm.
And you didn't know whether to go and jump in. And it's one of the things that thoroughly annoys me as a tour guide. I love my job. I do all these things, you know, is when you're in the middle of some emotional story where the reason you're doing it is about a twin losing his twin on the beach or a last letter home, and someone goes, so that gun you just mentioned, was that the 88 Pack 43-45, or was that the earlier model? You go, it was the earlier model. And you go, and you think to yourself, no, that's not the point of this story. We can do gun calibers later on. I'm trying to get you into a moment, and it's very frustrating when someone throws you off the narrative you're on at that moment. It's not that we don't like questions. We love questions. Without any questions, what we do becomes dry and lecturing. But it's the fact that I ask you something that's the wrong subject at the time. And so that when I was around the veterans, you'd have to wait your moment. Go, it would be a Panzer IV. It was a Panzer IV you were facing because I didn't want to be that annoying kid who goes, yeah, that kid always pops up with which tank it was. No, that's not me. So that's I suppose where I started guiding, and then I came over and then ran a company and had employees and what have you, and did it professionally. But it was all these experiences I'd had prior to that were sowing the seeds, I suppose, of being able to organize and communicate and get things off the ground. And yeah, so that's the again another long answer. I apologize for rambling.
No, it's great.
It's confinement, you know. I haven't spoken to any human beings, so it's now just coming. No. Yeah, no, that's kind of how I got into it.
Well, okay, so then from that, why, why is it important for you to teach people about this history?
Now, that's the thing. I knew you were going to ask, because you told me a few minutes ago you were going to ask that, and I still don't really have an answer, because the answers that I have sound like they're the answer. I don't know that they are. In that, when you say things like, I could easily just rattle off, well, it's important to learn from the past to prevent making the same mistakes in the future. And I do believe that, but that's not really it. But it's partly it. But if I say some of the other things, it just sounds pretentious psychobabble. In that, what I'm trying to do is get people to think about themselves, really, via the avenue of history. But when I try and articulate that, it just sounds completely stupid.
So can you tell me or give me an example of a story or an episode that you would tell on your tours to help people, through learning about D-Day, connect with themselves?
Sure. So the thing is, you're looking for visual clues from them as to what the avenue is going to be to approach them. And if they're a doctor, you go in via the medical branch. Anyway, this particular example had these 6 Texans, and they were something, and they were all ex-cops and Marines and sheriffs and guys and pickups and football and beer and they were very nice, but they had an experience before they came to Normandy where they were in Paris and they stumbled into a gay bar, a gay bar. I wasn't there at the time. I don't know what it really was. Could have just been a normal French brasserie, but their joke was they kept making these kind of slightly naughty, homophobic comments about France and Europe, and you got to watch yourself here because they all like that. And they're my customers. I can't tell them, excuse me, guys, being a bit homophobic. Well, I suppose I could do that, but I didn't. Anyway, second day of the tour in Omaha Beach. And I'm telling a story of a sergeant in the 1st Division who crawled up the beach with his elbows in the shingle, pushing his Woodadge on at 61 with a bazooka that had been damaged. He wasn't sure it was going to work. And he found a rocket for the bazooka, or 3 rockets. He fired it at a German bunker and knocked out a German Tobruk, and Distinguished Service Cross, hero, saved the day. And I did this story in a particularly gung-ho kind of I was doing all the actions and the crying out the moment, and they're meant with this guy crawling up the beach. And afterwards, I finished it. I said, so, and the guy's name said, he's still alive and lives in Taunton, Massachusetts, with his male partner of the last 60 years. And their 6 faces went, and it's like I could use visible thought bubbles over their heads, where they were processing the idea that a gay man has to be Elton John or Liberace. And the gay man could have actually been a hero in the 1st Division on D-Day, calling up and I left it really long before I spoke again. And I can hear the window sound as their brains are actually coming back online. And I said, I just kind of own you a curveball or something. And they were, and I said, because, let's be honest, there's 60 million uniform in the USA. If you believe Kinsey in the 1960s, 10 of them are homosexual. So let's deal with the fact that a lot of people who served in World War II were not heterosexual. Clint Eastwood movie ideal. And they kind of, and you knew You weren't going to change the way they'd been raised. You weren't going to ultimately change the way they saw the world. But for a minute, maybe just a minute, the neat blocks in their heads where things fell were just all jumbled up a bit. And it was like, and that's the kind of thing you're going, it's not that you set out, I'm going to prove to these guys that homophobia is wrong. That's not, these things happen spontaneously. You're opening an ability for them to view things slightly differently. And another example just came into my head there is I had the daughter of an Omaha veteran, and she asked me to do some research, and she had convinced herself that this guy came ashore, I think the second day, D+1, was never anywhere near the front line, was always very safe, and didn't really have any danger. And as soon as I did the research, it turned out his unit had come ashore, I think 11:30 on D-Day, easy red, and we were an absolute storm. It was an ordnance company, but absolutely in a hellfire storm. And the unit got a unit citation, I believe, and unless he had come ashore a couple of days later as a replacement, which wasn't the case, I mean, there's no way he couldn't have been with this unit. It turned out that he must have been in the absolute thick of it. And I was trying to get this across to her in emails, and it wasn't, she was not taking on board kind of what I was saying. And when she was with me, and of course you can make the eye contact, you can just talk to someone face to face. And we were talking about the fact that I said, my dad always, he came ashore D+1 and didn't see any combat. And I said, well, you know, and I pulled up the archives I'd got. I said, well, no, the unit came ashore, and there's no reason for a second guy to have come ashore on his own the next day. It's not how the military works. They don't, you know, he was there. And I said, why do you think he came ashore the next day? Well, that's what he always told my mother in the letters. And I went, and my brain's now working. I said, what was your mum like? Oh, my mum, oh, she worried the minute he donned his khaki uniform and went off the station. And she worried and she worried and she worried about us, and she was on Valium or something, the entire war or something. And she just worried, and Dad knew that. And I said, well, you just answered your own question. Your dad didn't tell your mum the truth. And she went, oh, I never thought of that. And it just dawned, it suddenly, the penny dropped. Her dad had protected his wife, her mother, from his actual experiences. And so that's when you go back home thinking, job done today. You know, you've conveyed your usual, and the Allies landed at 6:30 in the morning and they covered 16 miles of coastline, blah, blah. You've done all that. But more importantly than that, you've helped this woman understand her dad's journey and her parents' marriage and her parents' relationship, and therefore her relationship with her mum and her dad. And you've been a tiny part of this. And one, as I'm on a roll now, I've got a third story that came into my head then as well. And this was a chap. He booked a group tour with other people. And he was you get people who are chatty, you get people who ask you questions, and he was the stoic, didn't say very much, but clearly was very affected by everything he saw. And he was lots of you know, dust in the air because he kept having to wipe his eyes, that kind of thing. And again, second day. It's always the second day, because the first day they're feeling you out, and you're feeling, and it's a second. They've had a night's sleep, and they've kind of. And the next day, we were having lunch, restaurant, Omaha Beach, and I kind of try and at lunch kind of go off topic for a bit, because otherwise you're not saving any kind of drama for the afternoon. I try and sort of say, so what do you do for a living, and what's your football team, and those Red Sox are doing badly this year, that kind of stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, and he just threw me this question out of nowhere, and I forget what the unit was now, but he said, do you happen to know? No, I know, it was the 99th Division. Do you know where the 99th Division were on December the 17th, 1944? I think December the 18th. I said, Yeah, I roughly, I know where they were, yeah, up in the Ardennes. I said, why? I said, no, that was my dad's unit. Oh, yeah, well, they had a pretty tough time because basically Joachim Peiper's German Panzer Corps started hurtling out of the forest. And I said, well, why do you ask? You know, he said, that is the day my father committed suicide 30 years after the war. It was December the 18th. And you're like, because you're just having a lunch and now someone is, the other people in the group now they're all now finding corners of the ceiling to look at and getting their phones out because they're like, oh, there's something started. I said, well, I'm going to go, they kind of all, they scatter, kind of, and I'm there left there. And basically, this poor guy unburdened himself about the hatred he had for his father because his father had committed suicide without life insurance, all these things there, left his mum financially in the lurch, and he grew up resenting his father. And why would my father leave us like that? And I've been doing stories of you know, the usual stories of decision making and sacrifice and you know, why people do this and the difference between failure and success and going left at the landing craft and going right, and you go left you get killed, if you go right you survive, and all those things. And he'd been sort of squirreling all this information away, and he said, so you know, he's asking me now why I think his father might have committed suicide on this particular day. I don't know why I'm kind of laughing now, and laughing at the surreal nature of this whole conversation happening in a lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm going, well, I don't know, you know, I mean, I'm not a psycho, I'm not an analyst, I'm not a psychiatrist, I don't know. All I can say is maybe, you know, he got the news, and yeah, apparently this guy got into it, he got up, had breakfast with his family, and then went into the garage and closed the door and switched the car on and gassed himself.
Wow.
And he's asking me now to explain why. And, you know, I said, well, you know, I don't know. Did you see a newspaper headline? Was there a bit on 17 of this newspaper that said, and today is the 30th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, and some memory just catapulted into his head and caused him to do this horrendous thing. And I'm not saying these stories these happened quite rarely, these stories, but at the end of the tour, and I forget how we concluded this. I think actually I had to bring it to a halt because we had to move on. It's like, well, it's like a psychosis. Well, your hour's up. We'll have to tackle this again next session, kind of thing. You know, we got to go on, and we had to go. And I couldn't devote the rest of the tour to him because it's not a private tour. It's not anyway. At the end of the tour, and you know, I got back to my air and left the other group, and he came up afterwards, and he just said thank you. Thank you. Said I think I'm beginning to understand what my dad went through. Some of the stories you've told about combat, just made me understand what the experiences my father had. And he said, I still will resent him. I'm more sympathetic now. And you go, and again, there's the days you go home and you go, I could be stocking supermarket shelves. Not that there's anything wrong. We need to eat, and thankfully people are bringing supplies through now in coronavirus, and let's pay tribute to the key workers. But I've had an impact on someone's life accidentally, and that's extraordinary. They're the opportunities. So I suppose I've answered my own question. Why do I do what I do for those moments? Those you kind of think that little moment. Not that you want someone to go through something personal in front of you, but you want to make a change. And those three stories are, let's stick into particularly, are very dramatic, emotional changes. But on a more normal day-to-day level, someone to just be able to reflect on what conflict is, what the world at war means, what saying goodbye to a relative for 3 years is, and beyond just the context of what day a battle kicked off on, which is the bones of what we have to do, is explain dates and times and formations. But through that is a human experience that you are trying to convey. But yeah, that's I went off on again on that, but that's sort of why I do what I do, really.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that, I mean, it's part of it's part of this idea of why, you know, I'm creating this series or talking to different people about how history helps us create our future, and how it helps us through understanding the history. We can understand our present day, and we can look at, you know, what are the actions that we're taking today for tomorrow. And that's why I always talk about our future history is actually what we're doing right now. And yeah, I think that that's so important. And for me, you know, I'm even with you know, studying World War II in college, I always say, you know, it's like I'm a human historian, and the human stories of World War II. I couldn't tell you which tank was behind which hedgerow, and, you know, which division. I mean, yeah, I know the big general picture, but I don't know all those details. And that's
the thing is that history as a subject at school or in general, it bridges science and art like other subjects don't. You know, physics, mathematics, science, chemistry, even geography are very, very factual. This country's borders changed on this date. That river is that number of miles long. And then in the art side of things, and music, dramatic arts, theatre, you've got expression. And history bridges those two types of education. Well, it should do. It should do. I mean, a general rule, most historians, tour guides, authors I know had crap history teachers. I don't know why there's a connection, but they always. Yeah, mine was particularly bad. He stayed everything he said for a start, and so you get wet at the front. And he was a PE teacher as well, who all, in my experience, they're all bullies. So he was a bully, and it was just, I remember Sparta. Every time he said Sparta, we just had to. So, and he was awful. Everything was dates. Everything was date. Yeah. And you never felt like you were a Spartan warrior for a second, or what was the experience of that? And so that seems to be unique, a completely common thing that history. People who share history now had a bad experience of it when they were young, and that's and it's. I like to be able to look at anyone who can communicate history in a really good way, and there's so many different ways of communicating history, but I think it does help you understand yourself, and you're completely right. Understand the future, understand the past, and it's an interesting subject that I think is treated too much as it's all just dates. Then is it? Oh, your books on this, all just dates, is it? You know, and I had someone tell me once, you'll never be a proper Normandy tour guide until you can list numerically every landing craft number from west to east across Omaha Beach. So LCA 4632, L6. Well, I must be a completely crap tour guide because I still couldn't tell you numerically the number. It's a memory trick, isn't it?
Yeah.
We could all do that if we needed to, is parrot fashion, learn some kind of list of a table of lists. How does that in any way convey human experience? How is that in any way going to make someone learn anything? It's like, I used to, when I used to check my reviews and things with my tours, and you know, you go, oh, you read that one, that's nice. And it was, someone said, a friend of mine, a Belgian friend of mine, Normandy, Gert, said, you never want to, if you see a review saying, oh, he was a walking encyclopedia, that's a negative, not a positive. And I go, no, that's a good thing, isn't it? No, because you don't read encyclopedias for fun. You read it you're not a fact machine.
Yeah.
You've got to know your subject. But I'm not there to give, they kind of pull a handle like, you know, penny machine. 307. Yeah, that's not, 17th division. That's not, I don't know that. Excuse me again. So you've got to have the information in your head, but you're not there to give facts. You've got to somehow use the facts to connect them with whatever it is you're trying to get them to connect to.
Yeah.
Which you assess on the day depending on the person, and that's why I'm doing this filming project now, my World War II TV thing, which I thoroughly enjoy, and it's kind of a bit on hold because I can't get out and finish things and lockdown and what have you. But I enjoy it, but I'm also somewhat frustrated by the fact you have no contact with anybody with a film. A film is a thing you give people. There's no, you can't. It's a finished product, and I like it. And I like with the book, you give the book as it is. What you really like to do is give a forum so that halfway through the book you can go, actually, no, I want to go down this path with you, and you go off and deviate, or you elaborate on something that you. And that's where anything that becomes more one-on-one, podcasts, tour guides, forums, debates. I don't even like the lecture format. I can do it. I don't enjoy doing it. Where you say, give me an hour on, and you just go.
Yeah.
It's dry. It has no.
Because there's not connection. That exchange.
Yeah. So, it's all about making that connection, and that's why I stopped guiding for about a year last year.
Right.
I mostly was doing my film stuff, and I was right to do it because I started not despise guiding, but it was all feeling very samey, and there was a bit of this. Here we go again, and I counted up. I made the mistake of counting up how many times I told some of the stories. And it was, I think it was up to about 1,300 times in some of the stories I've stood at Point du Hoc and told the same story. And you think, wow, that's something to be proud of. And also, wow, how boring. And I think I need to take a break from it. And this year, in fact, I was intending to do more guiding again. Not go back into it full time, but go back into it for some money, but also because I thought I had enough of having the connection with, but actually no, I missed it.
Yeah, you need a little of both.
And then again, the balance between doing some guiding, some writing, some speaking, and do a bit of everything. So therefore, I don't want to say bored, but don't get, and trapped is not the right word. I don't get, and stuck isn't the right. Don't get where one thing becomes too much of a routine. I suppose.
You need the diversity because all of those different things feed together and create an energy and a dynamic. And I totally understand the need to be doing lots of different things at the same time.
Well, you're the master of that, aren't you? You have, I mean, I keep waiting for the email saying, I've just started mountain climbing. I'm halfway up Everest. I just, scuba diving now. Just diving on the Titanic next week in my underwear. You are always new idea. I'm a amateur at changing section compared to you. Yes, it's
okay, well, so this then begs the question of kind of where are things standing right now? I mean, you've all been, all of you, all the guides I know in Normandy are obviously everyone's confined.
Yeah.
Your major clientele can't travel across, the Atlantic. And as you said, a month ago when we were speaking, that the beaches were closed.
Yeah.
Obviously, the museums are closed. Things are starting to come, to open up a little bit. Are they giving any inclination of what you can expect for the summer? Or?
Well, this year's gone certainly in terms of English speaking. American English visitors, this year's gone. Whether or not there'll be a deal with British visitors coming over later in the year, who knows? I don't know. The museums are talking about trying to get French-speaking visitors to try and take more tours, but traditionally they've never taken tours. It's not the market.
Mm-hmm.
The French and Belgians just don't do the private tour thing. I'm not even going to investigate why that is.
Yeah. I mean, but are people even going to have access to museums or access to the sites that are open air sites? We don't know yet.
We don't know. I mean, the museums, there's mixed information coming out, unfortunately. It's not, and I'm completely sympathetic to the fact that all of our governments are dealing with something absolutely completely new, and there's no precedent here. And so I'm not going to, why don't they tell us when the museums, I completely get that
they don't know. What unusual. Do?
But there's maybe some provision that some of the smaller museums will be able to open, provided they can ensure distancing, but we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Anything in terms of large groups, so bus tours are out for the minimum of July, and I think that will be later than that. Open sites, I think, are okay, but everyone's the guiding industry all just sort of waiting to find out what the news is going to be.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. And it's I think there'll be casualties. There's companies going bust and things, and the cruise ships and the big stuff. And I think when it all comes back to whatever kind of back it comes to, the playing field, the teams playing when we come back will not be all the same teams that were in the league before we shut down. There'll be some players gone, and 3 months ago, the big heated discussion here in Normandy was the fact they roped off Point du Hoc to a little 6-foot wide walkway, and how terrible it's going to be because where all the thousands of people are going to stand. Well, right now, no one's at Point du Hoc. So what seemed important 3 months ago is irrelevant now. So in a way, I think the guides near the top of their game, the ones with a reputation, I think that they'll come through this unscathed. I mean, financially, we'll all be hit this year, but I think we'll all be here when it all starts off again. But the cleverer ones, I think, are thinking outside the box and trying to think, well, what can we do in the meantime? What can we do? And I planned this year to do lots of work in London. That had been my thing. I wanted to get off some lecturing and talks and things there, to meet people and get people coming along. And of course, that's all out the window. I believe there's an untapped market in the British sector, the British visitors. I think the big British bus tours come over, not so much the individuals. And there's a whole cross section of Brits who've got relatives who fought in World War II. And I was kind of trying to open up that idea a bit, and also kind of push my filmmaking projects and things. Of course, that's all gone. But in replace that have been podcasts and things like that I've got involved in, which are fun to do. There's absolutely zero financial benefit from doing them yet, but you kind of hope that it might lead to something, and it's keeping your name out there and being inventive. And maybe we'll have to do instead of taking people physically to the beaches, can we do live streaming from beaches to people in their living rooms? Can that be of course, nothing will ever replace standing in Waisak, in Bastogne or Omaha Beach, but you can widen it out. And in fact, that taps into an aspect I don't like about my industry, is that the best tour guides are offering, and I'm guilty of this, offering mostly private tours, so only to people who can afford a private tour.
Yeah.
And I'm a socialist, and I believe that everybody should have access to the same level of history. And the fact is, I'm only available in person to people who can afford me. And I don't mean just me, I mean all the private tour guides. And that is not to say there aren't some very good tour guides working for the companies that offer standard tours, but certainly there's more quality in the private market than there is in the other end of the market. And that I find innately unfair. I find that why shouldn't someone who hasn't got much money be prevented from having access to good history? Which is partly why I want to do the filmmaking thing. So I
Yeah,
can
that's
put
what I was going to say.
a
Yeah.
documentary on, and then everyone can see it. And my stuff I put free on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm not charging for it. So yeah, I think that the world, the guiding history world, will be very different after Corona. Well, everything, the whole world will be different. Our lives are going to divide into pre and post COVID-19, as are all our World War II people we know. It's pre and post World War II, and I hate the people trying to make parallels between COVID and World War II. That just gets on my nerves.
Yeah.
I can see where they're going with it. I can see, but I think the parallels are too abstract. In that a bombing raid in World War II had a beginning and an end. You know, the sirens went woo, and you all went down the shelters, and then they went woo, and you all go up again, and it's safe for a while. And you can have a community spirit together in the war. Whereas with this virus, it's an unseen enemy that doesn't. There's going to be no treaty signed. We're not going to have all the nations. Well, it's gone now. It's gone now. It's surrendered. The COVID-19 has accepted unconditional surrender, and we are now occupying COVID-19. Oh, yay! Go us, go world. That's not going to happen. So so making endless comparisons to World War II.
No.
On the one hand, helps you and I because it gets people buying books about D-Day and stuff. On the other hand, I hate this.
Yeah.
Everything isn't World War II. Everything we face. I mean, when you see it in the press, then you say, "It's D-Day for the Football League this year." And you go, "No, it's not D-Day. It's a hurdle."
Yeah.
You're referencing. Comparing it to amphibious invasion, and that gets on my.
Well, it's even the vocabulary around, we're at war with this virus, and Macron making that statement to the French public about we're going to war, and Trump in the States, using that he's a wartime president, and I can't stand those parallels. Someone the other day said to me, again, our age, and I hadn't thought of it this way. And she said, "This is like AIDS. This is changing our way that we interact with each other forever." And it's the way that when the AIDS epidemic started, and it totally changed our social interactions.
Yeah.
And you and I can relate to that because that happened in our childhood. And it did, and it will forever be different after that. And again, but it's not something. Yeah, it's not something you get a victory over, and it's going to take.
No, I mean, in Britain, there's the historical kind of people are discussing. Johnson clearly wants to be Churchill. He wrote his people wrote a book about Churchill. It's pretty awful a few years ago, and he's ending up being Chamberlain. I mean, that's and that's no offense to Chamberlain, who in his own way had ideas that were probably wrong and naive, but Johnson's got his chance to be Churchill. Trump has got his chance to be Roosevelt and is coming up short. You've just almost got the moment you've wanted, and you've fucked it up. And Johnson clearly has just what he. Yeah. You can imagine as a boy at Eton, he wanted to have the moment where he led the country, and he's just, this stay at home, don't stay at home, go out, don't go out. Yeah. It's, when you're wanting clarity, when you're wanting clear, determined focus, and you're getting none of it. Is
not from those two, at least.
Not from those two. There's some people are doing. We all want to move to New Zealand. We all wish we were there now. with we just stopped it. Yeah, we all stopped it, and 3 people, whatever. It's just wow. But yeah, no, we've gone off on a bit of a tangent there. But yeah, and yeah, the World War II connections with everything. It gets very repetitive and very old very quickly, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does. Um, all right. Well, that feels like a good place for us to stop. I I could talk to you forever.
I'm not doing anything else today, so no. It's no,
Okay,
it's
okay,
it's
well
it's
then
all
I
been
will.
fun.
Okay, I'm going to change topics and I'm going to go to something else then, because this is one other question. So we just celebrated the end, VE Day on the 8th and the 9th of May last week. And so this year, for the first time, the Germans in Berlin on the Brandenburg Gate projected the word thank you written in English, German, Russian, and French. With the organizers, they said that their aim was to thank the Allies for liberating Europe from Nazi National Socialism. And this had a very, well, it ruffled a lot of feathers. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you just lob that can of worms in there, and let's open it. And yeah, it's really nuanced and really complicated, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And you asked me what would I think and what would Mag, my other half, think, and I know we would not think the same, because Mag is from a country that was occupied, France, whereas I'm from Britain that wasn't, and we have views that are absolutely in agreement, and then there's other bits where we diverge off a bit, and I can only look at it from the point of view as a Brit, and we've seen the same thing in Normandy with the anniversaries, where Reagan wanted to invite the Germans in 84 and was advised that it was too soon, and then in 89 they were invited but didn't come, I think, and in 94 they were invited, did come, but stayed in the background. Yeah. In 99, they came, and then gradually it's built up to where the German leader will actually stand alongside and make speeches. But it's taken from the 40th to the 75th to just gradually bring the Germans in, like slowly creeping them in step by step, so no one kind of notices them coming in on the side. Mm-hmm. And then when they actually come in, you realize, they haven't been there all the time. And I think that's the parallel with Germany and the liberation, and who are the baddies and who are the goodies, and are descendants of the baddies, can they now look at it with the same view as the descendants of my only it's not an answer to your exact question, but it's answering a different question. And it's the question we get in Normandy all the time: is what's it like for Germans to come to Normandy? Which is
what's it like for Germans to come to Normandy? Yeah.
It's the similar theme, isn't it? It's that, and I never really understood that. I never knew what to say because I'm not a German, so I couldn't. But it's the same feeling I have as an English guy going to Ireland. Not saying exactly the same, but very similar. And I've been to Ireland a couple of times in my teens. I went again with Mag and Maddie 3 years ago, Dublin. And of course, I did some military stuff there. I went to Kilmanon Jail and saw some of the sites from 1916 Easter uprising, and went to the graves of Irish. This is pre-IRA, but the Irish Republicans, and there's Irish people talking to the groups of visitors, and they're saying, "Anybody hear English?" And you kind of go, and most of the people on the tours were either Irish or Americans. And I think on one of the tours, like 30 people in this group, I think I was the only English person. And I sort of put my hand up. And the guy sort of jokingly said, "Well, everything I'm going to say now, I don't mean that about you. I do mean it about you." and that uncomfortable aspect of acknowledging that we were the baddies there.
Mm-hmm.
To some, and others we were the goodies. And how complicated and nuanced that all is. And there's no problem going there as an Englishman and looking at the history, and people are very welcoming and forgiving, but you just tread slightly carefully. I would never have gone to Kilmainham jail wearing an England football team shirt. You know, you just you kind of try and leave nationalism at the doorstep a little bit. And I think that's the Berlin Brandenburg Gate thing. You can't answer those things in a single sentence. You need more deliberation. And I absolutely do not believe that a grandkid particularly can be held in any way responsible for the actions of the grandparents.
Thank goodness.
The parents, I don't know, because it starts getting the way you were raised directly, and it's
I certainly don't, uphold the political views of my parents.
No, I mean, there's one of my friends who I do some podcasts with, Alina, is half English, half Polish, and lives in Poland, and she's a Holocaust historian, and there's been some recent stuff about Poland because it was the 80th anniversary of the invasion of the beginning of World War II and what have you, and they didn't quite know how to label the camps that were in Poland, or what was Germany or Poland then, as are they Polish camps, or are they German camps, or are they Nazi camps, or are they Nazi German camps in Poland?
Mm-hmm.
And no matter which way they labeled it, people went, no, you can't call it that, because if you call it a Polish camp, you're implying the Polish were complicit in that. But if you call it German, you're avoiding the fact that Polish, and it's so, whichever way they labeled it, was, no, that's not the right label. You go, well, you've got to allow us to give it a label, or you have a label with a whole kind of caveat on by this. What we mean is this, and we don't mean these or that or them, but we do mean this. And that's the same kind of thing, isn't it? And clearly, absolutely clearly, there were millions of German victims of the Nazis.
Oh yeah.
Beyond German Jews, just intellectuals and homosexuals and poets and priests and industrialists, and that's in one half of my brain. And then the other half of my brain is it's always the mid ground of Germans, like the mid ground of French. When people say,
well, that's the same. France was liberated, but half of France was collaborating with Germany.
Yeah, because there's two ends. There's supporting something and opposing something are the two ends of anything, any regime. Or so in France, you've got resistance and you've got collaborating. And in Germany in World War II, you had Nazis and opponents of Nazis. But that doesn't include the 50% in the middle who are neither. Who are just living on a day-to-day basis, trying to keep their families alive and their heads down.
Yeah.
And right now, the US has a Republican government led by President Trump. And right now, Britain has a conservative. But that doesn't mean that the entire British population are conservatives who support Johnson. And it's the mid-ground where it's hard to put judgment, because every time you hear, I see a documentary about Dachau or Auschwitz or whatever, and you see the same footage of these Germans who lived a mile away, so we knew nothing about it. You think, no, you did. You can't not have. And I go, bullshit. You did know about it, or you had your suspicions, and I'm not saying you could do anything about it. And that's that. It's the mid ground.
Yeah.
Nazis can be vilified, and people who were against it are celebrated. There's Sophie Scholl's and the mid ground is where it gets sort of it gets really nuanced, and that's where the liberation of Berlin for half of the people in the country was somewhere in the middle, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the most the easiest way to explain that, or for people to connect with it, is to look at today and look at, the political leaders and regime in any country, and how many other people in that same country don't necessarily agree and are, but aren't necessarily out, fighting in a resistance against them. They're just trying to live their lives and survive
Yeah.
under, and where does that put them?
To answer your question, we have lost the ability to appreciate the middle ground and compromise.
Yes. Oh, completely.
Everything has become partisan, has become left and right. And so we have to label everything left or right or wrong. And we need to learn how to appreciate compromise and nuance and the complexity of it. And with that, but nuance and complexity doesn't make headlines, does it?
No.
So right-wing publications, left-wing publications will grab something and pull out their headline and use the side of it for their means, and that's when you reinforce whichever view you're putting across. The labeling of it is very odd, and the Germans, of course, many Germans were victims of Nazis.
Yeah.
And Nazis were prosecuted. And there's that mid ground of people who kind of went along with it and didn't, and then changed their mind halfway through. And it's like it's the simple thing, like how Rommel, Field Marshal Rommel, and Helen Patton, our friend, friends with the Rommel family and her father and grandfather, all that, and I struggle a little bit with the label of Rommel being a good German. He's not a bad German. He's not Heydrich. He's not Mengele, clearly, but he's also not actively trying to stop the Nazis.
Yeah.
So if you've got like a slider of, good, and where do you agree that Rommel can go on that line? And where he is on the line moves as the war moves on, because.
Oh, and it also moves between who's looking at that line and from what perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. So
for certain, he's very good, and for others, he's, and that's the thing with war and with history. There's so many different sides, and even if you have one fact, you have all these different perspectives of that fact. And when you look at it from here, you see something completely different than when you're looking over here and you're seeing something else, the context that it's put in here. So
which kind of brings you back to when you ask about why I do what I do. It's how and what you do, how you do what you do, and why you do what you do. Maybe you're trying to help them find a path that's comfortable for them, their window on history, how they can look at it objectively and subjectively, and try and clear the mess away a bit, and say, no, you can look at it from this way. You don't have to. You can be nuanced. You can be conflicted. You can celebrate heroism without celebrating war. Which is another thing that gets on my nerves, is that I have a lot of American clients and people who support me and follow me and stuff, who wonder why a person who can talk about World War II and is not a gun nut and doesn't, and I go, well, no, I'm a pacifist, really. I'm not a tree hugger. In this, I believe you have to kick ass sometimes. Absolutely, World War II is about as black and white as you ever had in terms of the reasons for a conflict. but I don't celebrate it. It would have been far better if they could all stayed at home and had some agreement in 1938 that have avoided the whole conflict completely, somehow. If there'd been a manageable way of avoiding the bloodshed.
Yeah.
And people get a bit pissy with us because, what do you mean you're a liberal? What do you mean you're a socialist? You know, well, I am. And I was asked to do a podcast last June, a radio show, and they sent lots of information to what they wanted to ask me, similar to what you're asking me today. And then they checked my website. No, they checked my Twitter feed or something, and they came back to me and said, "You're an atheist." I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Oh, well, this is a Christian radio show." I said, "And?" I said, "My lack of belief doesn't need to come into a conversation about D-Day unless you specifically ask me, you know, oh no, we could never have one of you talking about D-Day." And I went, okay then, you know, and it was just a really weird moment. They thought I'd be a good fit. And I thought, well, okay, so you don't, no, have you got a Christian tour guide you could recommend? Oh, okay, well, I recommended a Christian tour guide. I thought, okay, whatever. Yeah, we've lost the ability to look at things with impartiality and nuance and complexity and
yeah. I think for me,
that's a trick.
It's so important, even for just people to understand that history is subjective and that there are multiple perspectives, and
yes,
that those can coexist. And how do we exist in a world with that, you know, complex, you know, multiple viewpoints and multiple narratives? And so for me, it's really just one, getting people to understand that, or to see it, to feel it, and to and then to understand, yeah, that we each play a role in what we're gonna, you know, the narratives that we're writing for ourselves. That, you know, that history isn't something so far removed in a textbook, that it's personal, it's a human connection. And that's what I love about, you know, the stories you were saying, is how people were, yeah, coming to terms with that history and helping them make sense of their lives today. I think that that's so important.
And there's lots of things that that haven't, there's hot potatoes that haven't been thrown and talked about yet, and like heroism and duty. And the fact is, if you've got 156,000 participants on D-Day, there were a few people who ran and hid, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. Yeah. And they're still part of the machine. They're still part of the victory. They're still part. They're part of they're a cog on the wheel, even if they aren't Audie Murphy. And it's okay. It's okay. You know, it's an unnatural thing.
Well, that's it. That's it.
It's an unnatural thing, and
it's
we don't have to all be heroes.
No, and what I think, what really bugs me, and I wrote about this in a post last week on the 8th of May, was this idea that, you know, when we strip history and we make it into the good and the bad side, and the black and the white, and we take out all of those nuances, then we're actually denying ourselves the ability to see those nuances in our present day.
Yes, and that we are not good and bad. We are all both of those things and neither of those things, and we can do bad things with good intentions, or good things with bad intentions. And people say, what's the best book on D-Day, or what's the best version of this? Well, there is no best version of any of this stuff, because it's completely down to the individual who sees it in a different way, and understanding that is important. And I also think that sometimes the academic teaching of history doesn't necessarily allow for much nuance out of the one way of teaching things. For example, in Normandy, there's a lot of the younger tour guides have actually got a qualification in guiding. They've been, well, it is a year course in whatever it is, and they've been taught which is great, and they know their stuff. But maybe they're all being taught it exactly the same way by almost the same person who's read the same books. And the older tour guides, we've got ex-servicemen, there's ex-actors, there's people like me, I've done different things and been printer and film extra, and then there's a monk, a former monk, there's a stripper, a former stripper, and I'm not saying that necessarily pole dancing gives one an insight into something. It means that if you get these people together and you discuss something, you're getting a broad range of opinions on something and viewpoints about life, and therefore how to understand and interpret history. And every tour guide coming out of a particular degree in a particular course, a particular university, is inevitably going to push people into one particular direction. Diversity is, I often say to people, oh, we'll come back and tour with you again next year. I said, no, don't tour with me next year, tour with someone else next year. You go, don't you like us? No, I don't dislike you, but you've had my point of view, someone else, because you'll get someone else's point of view.
Yeah.
Because I cannot help being a middle-aged British man. No matter how much I try and not be a British middle-aged man, I am.
Yeah.
And everything is filtered through that. And I try and be impartial. I try and be balanced and unbiased. But I know that I'm always failing. And so you go, read someone else. Read an American author. Read a French author. Read a German author. And all those to understand it. And it goes back to this idea that history isn't a science. History is it's an art. It's more in the art field than it is a science field. And helping people to kind of be able to view it in a different way is key. And that's, it's not, so when you ask about Berlin and the Brandenburg Gate University, you're not actually asking for an answer to that question. You're asking, how can we find our answers to that question and understand that someone else's answer can be different to our one, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And there's no one answer to that. There's no one answer. No. Yes, this is okay. This is not okay.
No. Everyone's going to have their perspective and opinion, for sure.
And I had planned this November, and it could still happen, to go to Poland. In fact, a group of us idiots over here, the blokes trips. We did Arnhem last November. We go to Poland. And Alina, who I mentioned, will still give us a 2-day tour of Auschwitz and some behind the scenes stuff. And all her grandfather was in the Warsaw Uprising and this, that, and the other. And I was looking forward to it. I mean, looking forward to experience.
Yeah.
I was worried, and I'm still worried, because it will happen at some point, that when I come back, my unbiased view of the Germans will have been damaged temporarily, at least. Because I haven't been to Auschwitz ever.
But those are certain Germans.
Of course. And my brain will be telling me that. My brain will be going to put this on people. But I will still come back with a bit of, fuck you, Germany. Fuck you. For doing. And I'll have to process that and get rid of that. We've got to go back to being they're not all that. And that's okay. It's okay to go through that. And in my case, I'm going off a tangent again, I know I've got a little bit of darkness in my head is as a result of, I mentioned earlier, how I've been an associate member of the Far Eastern Prisoners of War. East Anglia, where I'm from, is where the corps that were out in Singapore in 1940, the Cambridgeshire Regiment, Norfolk Regiment, entire battalions of people from my area basically walked straight off a boat in Singapore into the Japanese prisoner of war camp for the next 5 years. They didn't even get a chance they surrendered. And I'd go to these meetings and just sit for 2 hours and listen to just the most brutal stories of Japanese on prisoner torture. And I was like 15, and in 14, 15, 16, that's when all your brain is absorbing everything. Your kids at the age where everything is just being taken in that head now, and music and films and culture and your parents' films and your parents' books and your poetry and art. And so all this stuff is just going into my head. And I can't ever quite get rid of a dislike that sits lodged in my head. There's a root there of dislike of the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
In World War II, for the treatment of the Allied, I would never ever act on. If one of my stepdaughters came home with a Japanese boyfriend, they would be welcomed and embraced into the household like anybody else. This dark part of my brain would be reminding me of my childhood. And that's okay to understand that you've got that. It's okay to understanding you've got it and understanding.
Exactly.
I don't want to get rid of it completely, because those memories are precious. These poor old men.
Mm-hmm.
It was some veterans groups you've been to. It's all just jovial. They're talking about, remember the beers we had in Hamburg in '45, and not the prisoners of war of the Japanese. It was just sorrow. It was just unrelenting. And I don't even, people, I think this comes up in conversation. People say, tell us some of the stories. I say, no fucking way am I telling you the stories. Because whatever you're thinking they are, they're worse. They are worse than that, and then worse than that, and then worse than that.
Yeah.
And, dark shit that is. And my parents probably didn't even know that I was going to these things. They thought, oh, he's going to go to Spencer. I was at World War II, guys. I was hearing just.
Well, but I think that,
horror.
I think that that's also part of it, is learning to understand the messages that we've been taught as children, or that we've heard or been exposed to. I mean, for me, it was, growing up in the United States during the Cold War, and then as an adult in the last, 5 years now, having traveled to Russia 3 times. And, going there and being so, just finding it so heartwarming, just so wonderful. I mean, the welcome that I received from the Russians that I met were, ones that I was personally working with, and ones that, I would just meet in a store or something on the street. They were all so open and kind, and I would find myself kind of walking down, and I'd have this idea in my head, and I think, wait a minute, but that doesn't correspond with what's my reality is and the people that I'm connecting with. So where is that coming from? Oh, that's coming from all those messages that I received, from the media and from, people during the Cold War in the United States. And it has nothing to do with today. So it didn't affect the way that I reacted or the way that I acted now. But it certainly, there was a filter that I often kind of had to go, no, wipe that away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And understand what's going on now. And it's, I think it's important to be able to distinguish and understand that, and know, where our biases come from and why, and then to understand, okay, well, why, for me, it's, it's like, why didn't we learn anything about what the Soviet Union contributed to the war effort to defeat the Germans? And it's like, oh, right, because it was the Cold War, and there was this, animosity between these countries that were once allies, and then they weren't. And now it's, no one's really sure, and it's kind of hard to talk about, and okay. And but it's being able to see that and understand, oh, that's why I didn't, learn about that part of history, or I learned it from this perspective, or, and vice versa. The Russians, when I went to Russia and said, I'm writing a book about D-Day, then I'll go, what's D-Day?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Because they didn't learn anything about the Western Front. It's like, well, okay.
And it comes back to this understanding of complexity as well, and that seems to be something we've lost as a society and a species. And there's people I don't like, politicians, Johnson, but that doesn't mean they can't say one good thing once. And if they do say something I agree with, I'll say, yeah, actually that was a good speech. Trump in Normandy last year, I've been terrified of what he was going to say on June the 6th. The point where I actually wasn't sleeping. Oh my, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
I wasn't there. Mag was there that day. Actually, with veterans right there. Yeah.
back in the background.
I was stuck in. I'd done my bit for the BBC in the morning. I was stuck waiting 3 hours to wait for a training pond. I was just sitting having a beer in a brasserie in. Anyway, I went back and watched it. It was all right, pretty good.
Yeah.
Not great, not the worst, but it's like okay, yeah, fair enough.
The script.
Good enough, yeah. Well done. And I didn't feel the need to carry on my dislike of him because of that. Yeah, you're right. You're right there. Well done. Good. Thanks for not fucking it up. and so that's okay. And I can say that. And why can't we admit sometimes people we don't like can be right, and people we do like can get it wrong? And acceptance of nuance and acceptance of different views. And when people come entrenched with one view about D-Day, you go, okay, that's a great view. Here's another one.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
people don't want to go to German cemeteries, for example, because they don't want to see the baddies. We've had that so quite often. You get that.
Really?
I don't want to go in there. Yeah, no, it's a regular thing. The standard one-day tour in Normandy from American beaches is Lacombe German Cemetery first, Santa Maria Glees, Utah Beach, Point du Hoc, Omaha, second stop in Omaha, American Cemetery, back to Bayer. That's the standard loop. Not now, but dozens of minibuses do that every day. Buses. And once a week, twice a week, whatever, one person at least on one tour will say to their guide, I don't want to go in the German cemetery, I'm going to sit in the van, I don't want to go in there, I don't want to see the baddies, I don't care. And it's just a standard that we all know it's going to happen every now and then, and it does happen every now and then. And usually you just go, well, come along and have a look. And and I always, if they don't want to go in, I say, well, for no other reason, it'll give you a good contrast when you go to your cemetery at the end of the day. Having seen the German one first, it'll give you something, a counterpoint. It'll give you a basis to reflect from, and you know exactly what's going to happen because they always go in and they go, actually, I'm glad I went in there in the end. And it's a standard. You know what they're going to. There's times when you know what they're going to say before they even say it. You've seen it so many times before, and you can see the same process going through. And they go in there, and you do the same talk, and they go, and you subtly remind them they had mothers as well, and they had wives, and their letters home were exactly the same as our letters home and your letters home. And it was like, I'm terrified, I'm scared, I wish I was at home. How's the dog? I'm hungry. And whether you're a British soldier, or a Russian soldier, or an American soldier, or a Japanese soldier, they all wrote the same thing back, going, I hope I'm home soon. I'm terrified. I wish I was. And you get across that universality of experience. And they go, well, are there SS buried here? Yeah, there's some SS buried here, and there's some really nasty, particular individuals here as well that we could talk about if you wanted to. And so, yeah, you're just little steps of them stepping outside of the way they thought they wanted to see things, and you try and control them into seeing things from a slightly different point of view, and then you can feel you've accomplished something, as you do with your book and your lectures. Someone comes up and I used to think that, but now you've actually made me think this, and you go, okay, yeah, good.
Yeah.
Well done, me. Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's looking at the world slightly differently, using history as the way of looking at the world and the future, as you always say, and therefore yourself.
Definitely. The power of history to help us see the present from a different perspective and look towards our future and new possibilities. I love this conversation with Paul, and I really hope you'll check out his website, ddayhistorian.com, and World War II TV on YouTube, where you can subscribe for free. See you soon.